The town of Dry Creek had gathered like vultures by the sheriff's porch that gray morning. The sky hung low, a flat wash of pale light that turned the street to dull silver. No wind moved. Only the scrape of boots on dry boards broke the stillness as Sheriff Brand hauled Clara Mayfield out by the arm. She was 26, barefoot, her once blue dress torn to the knees. Mud streaked her calves. Blood darkened her lip. Her eyes, green once, bright as spring leaves, were now clouded and hollow. The sheriff's voice came hard and flat. "By the order of this town, you're to leave. You'll not set foot here again, Mrs. Mayfield. Not so long as these people draw breath." The crowd muttered. A woman whispered to her husband, "He should have shot her instead." Clara's gaze didn't move. She stared at the dust beneath her toes, the dust she'd swept from her own porch a month ago before her world cracked open. From the edge of the gathering, Jonas Hale watched. 33, long frame, rough beard, eyes gray as river stone. He leaned against a post, hat low, jaw tight. He'd ridden 40 miles just to see the truth for himself, and there it was, uglier than rumor. Evan Mayfield stood across the street, polished as ever. 38, owner of the Mayfield Ranch. His black coat clean, as if no sin could touch it. His lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Tell them what you did," he called. "Tell them why your fine husband had to put you out." Clara's breath came shallow. "You'll twist it, Evan. You always do." The sheriff shoved her forward. "That's enough. You're done here." She stumbled into the open street. The watching faces turned away, as though her shame might be catching. Jonas felt something in him burn cold. He'd worked under Evan once, back when he still believed men could earn their peace through obedience. He'd left after seeing too much, after seeing Clara flinch one too many times at her husband's hand. Now she was being thrown out for saving a Cheyenne boy, beaten for mercy, damned for it. Jonas had no word for that kind of cowardice, only the heavy tightening in his chest. As the sheriff raised his rifle, signaling the end of it, Clara straightened her spine. Her lip trembled, but her voice didn't. "You can take my home," she said softly, "but you can't take the truth." No one answered. The sheriff waved her off. "Get walking." She turned and began down the road, barefoot through the cold dust, past faces she'd once called neighbors. Jonas stepped out from the post shadow, his boots grinding on the grit. He watched her fade beyond the edge of town, swallowed by the gray horizon. Then he swung into his saddle. He didn't ride after her yet. He waited until the last of the crowd broke apart, and only the echo of her name hung in the air like smoke. Then he whispered to no one, "You damn fool! Clara, what did they do to you?" And he rode. By nightfall, the plains turned to iron. The air grew colder, sharp against the skin. A pale moon hung thin and low, giving no warmth. Clara trudged through grass, every step tearing at her raw feet. Her breath shuddered out in small white clouds. She clutched a torn shawl around her shoulders, the only thing she'd been allowed to keep. Behind her, the lights of Dry Creek had vanished. Ahead stretched emptiness. No ranch lights, no sound but the whisper of the wind. She thought of the Cheyenne child, the small boy she'd hidden behind her kitchen wall 3 nights before the beating. His face, dirt-streaked, eyes wild with fear, wouldn't leave her mind. He'd been hunted by Evan's men for stealing food. Clara had given him bread and water. That kindness had cost her everything. Her body ached. She fell once, knees cutting open on the frozen ground. She didn't cry. She couldn't. The tears had gone dry days ago. By the time she reached the river, the current whispered low but dangerous. She knelt, cupped the cold water to her lips, and winced as it burned her cracked skin. Behind her, in the dark distance, came the faint thud of hooves. Jonas reined in his horse just beyond the ridge. He didn't call out. He watched her through the drifting mist, the way she moved like someone fighting both earth and death. He saw her collapse to her knees, then pitch forward. He was off his horse before he thought. The cold bit deep as he knelt beside her, turning her over. Her skin burned with fever, her pulse faint. "Clara," he whispered. Her eyelids fluttered. "Jonas." "Yeah, easy now." He shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. Her body shook under his hands. You shouldn't be come, she murmured, half delirious. Wasn't planning on it, he said, but plans change. He lifted her gently, placing her across the saddle. His horse, a big gray gelding, shifted but held steady. As they rode toward the tree line, the wind picked up long, mournful gusts that carried the smell of pine and rain. Jonas looked over his shoulder once. The horizon behind them was empty, but he knew Evan wouldn't let things end there. They reached a small hollow where the ground rose enough to block the wind. Jonas made a fire, small and low. He checked her pulse again, pressed a wet cloth against her bruised temple. When she stirred, he gave her a few sips of water. "You'll live," he said, "if you let me help." Her lips cracked into something like a smile. "You always did like fixing things. Didn't do a good job last time. None of you as did." He sat back, the firelight painting his face in soft shadow. Clara watched him quietly, her voice faint. "Why'd you leave, Jonas?" He poked at the fire. "Because your husband's the kind of man who makes others small, and I don't shrink easy." She tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. He handed her a blanket, his eyes softening. "Sleep. I'll keep watch." As she drifted into uneasy rest, Jonas listened to the night. Somewhere, a wolf howled far off. The fire crackled low, steady as a heartbeat. He looked down at her pale face, streaked with dirt and defiance. "She saved a child," he muttered, "and for that, they'd let her die." He tossed another stick into the fire and stared into it until dawn crept in gray and cold. Morning came with thin light spilling over the hills. Frost silvered the grass. Clara stirred, wincing as she sat up. Her feet were bandaged with strips of Jonas's shirt, his coat still around her shoulders. He handed her a piece of dried venison. "Eat." She took it, chewing slowly. "Where are we?" "About 10 miles out of Dry Creek. Far enough for now." She looked toward the horizon, the empty land stretching wide and silent. "You shouldn't have followed me. Evan will send men." "I know." He poured coffee into a tin cup and offered it to her. "But I ain't one for letting the guilty decide what's right." She took the cup, her fingers brushing his. "You always did have a stubborn streak." He smiled faintly. "Takes one to know one." For a while they said nothing. The fire hissed low. A hawk circled overhead, wings slicing the still air. Finally, she whispered, "He'll come after me. He can't stand being defied." Jonas looked toward the east. "Then we'll keep moving west." She frowned. "And when we run out of west, then we make our own kind of peace." Her eyes met his. For the first time since her exile, she felt a flicker of something warm, hope, fragile and dangerous. By noon they were riding slow across the open plain, the air crisp, the sky pale blue and clean. Jonas led the horse by the reins, letting her rest against the saddle horn. They passed a line of old cottonwoods. Clara's gaze caught on the smallest one, bent and scarred. "My mother used to say trees remember kindness," she murmured. Jonas nodded. "Then the land's got a long memory. Maybe longer than men." He didn't see the tear that slid down her cheek. When the sun dipped lower, they stopped by another creek. Jonas helped her down. She stood shakily, leaning on his arm. "I can walk," she said, though her voice was weak. "I know you can," he said, "but you don't have to alone." Her breath hitched at the word. Alone. It had defined her for too long. He built another small fire as dusk fell, the smoke rising thin and straight. She watched the flames dance and finally said, "Jonas, you don't owe me this." He didn't look up. "You're right. I owe myself." She frowned. "For what?" "For not doing a damn thing the first time I saw him raise his hand to you." Silence stretched. The creek murmured softly beside them. Finally, she said, "Then maybe this time we both do something right." The light from the fire caught her face, tired, bruised, but no longer broken. He saw the steel return to her eyes. When the first stars blinked out above them, Jonas stood, checked his revolver, and looked toward the east. "He'll come. Best we be ready." She nodded, clutching his coat tighter. "Let him. I'm done running." He smiled, slow and proud. "That's the Clara I remember. The night settled around them, quiet except for the crackle of the fire and the soft rush of wind through dry grass. Jonas turned to her once more before taking his watch. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be rough." She laid down near the fire, her head against a saddlebag, and whispered, half to herself, "I already lived through rough." Jonas didn't answer. He just looked at the sky, the stars faint and cold above them. Somewhere out there was a reckoning waiting to happen, and he'd see it through. As the fire burned low, Clara slept. The wind rose again, gentle this time, carrying the smell of pine and smoke. For the first time since the sheriff dragged her through the dust, she dreamed not of fear, but of open road and quiet freedom. And when dawn would come again, she'd be ready to fight for it. The morning broke gray and bitter, a wind rolling off the river that cut through cloth and skin alike. Jonas Hale rode slow, leading the horse through a shallow creek. Clara sat slumped in the saddle, pale beneath the brim of his hat that shaded her face. Her voice was little more than breath. "How far now?" "Another half day," Jonas said. "There's a ridge past the canyon where we can rest." She nodded weakly, clutching his coat tighter around her shoulders. The plain stretched wide and colorless around them, dry grass whispering in the cold. A hawk circled far overhead. Jonas's eyes flicked back every few minutes. Tracks followed theirs, too clean, too deliberate. He'd seen them before sunrise and hadn't told Clara. The men behind them were careful, trained. Evan had sent riders. By mid-morning, the wind carried a sound that didn't belong, the faint ring of a spur. Jonas's hand went to his revolver. He turned sharply, voice low. "Get down, Clara. Now." She obeyed without question, sliding off the horse with a soft grunt. Jonas pulled his rifle from the saddle and crouched beside her in the tall grass. Two riders appeared from the ridge behind them, black coats flapping like wings. One raised his hand. "Jonas Hale, you're harboring a wanted woman." Jonas answered by chambering around. "You boys come closer. You'll find something worse than harboring." The first man spurred his horse forward. The second leveled his Winchester. A gunshot cracked across the open air. Jonas shoved Clara down and fired twice. The first bullet hit the lead rider's shoulder. The second tore through the other's hat. The horses reared, screaming. "Stay low," Jonas shouted. He rolled behind a fallen log. Firing again, with splinters flew. The first rider fell hard, clutching his chest. The second wheeled away, shouting curses as he vanished into the trees. Silence settled, broken only by Clara's quick breaths. Jonas lowered his rifle, checking the bodies. The dead man wore Evan's brand on his belt buckle. He spat into the dirt. Evan doesn't waste time. Clara's face was pale as chalk. "You killed him." "Would have been me instead." She looked at the dead man, then back at Jonas. "He'll send more." "I know." He reloaded calmly. "That's why we keep moving." They rode through the rest of the morning without speaking, the wind biting, the smell of gunpowder still clinging to their clothes. The next day dawned pale and cold. Mist clung to the trees, turning the world to gray. They broke camp early, following the river downstream. Jonas wanted distance between them and the mine. Clara rode stiffly, her hands trembling on the reins, but her jaw was set. Around noon, the river widened, churning fast from the rain. Jonas eyed it with a frown. "We'll have to cross." Clara looked uncertainly at the current. "It's deep." "Not too deep for the horse." "Hold on to me and don't let go." He led the gelding into the water. The current seized him instantly, dragging hard. Clara clung to his waist. The horse snorted, hooves sliding over slick stones. Halfway through, a log swept past, striking Jonas in the shoulder. He grunted, losing his grip on the reins. The horse stumbled. "Jonas!" Clara screamed as the water surged higher. She slid sideways, almost pulled away. Jonas lunged, catching her arm. The cold tore through him like knives. He heaved her up, pushing her toward the saddle, but the river dragged them both under. For a breathless moment, there was only dark water and silence. Then Jonas's boots found ground. He shoved Clara upward, coughing and gasping, and together they stumbled onto the far bank, collapsing on the wet grass. She turned toward him, eyes wide, voice shaking. "You should have let me go." He rolled onto his back, breathing hard. "Not while I've got breath left." She stared at him, the river's roar fading to a dull hum. Then she reached out, her hand trembling, and touched his cheek. "You don't know what he'll do when he finds us." "I've got a fair idea," Jonas said, sitting up, "but I'm done letting him win." He stood and helped her to her feet. Her dress clung to her, heavy and torn. She looked small against the endless land, but there was a new light in her eyes, something fierce. They walked until the river disappeared behind them, stopping when the land opened into a quiet field. Jonas built another fire, and they sat close to it, drying their clothes. The silence between them wasn't awkward this time. It was heavy with understanding. Clara spoke first. "Back then, you used to say a man can't outrun his own ghosts. I was drunk when I said that. Doesn't make it untrue." He smirked, tossing a stick into fire. "Guess I'm about to find out." Her voice softened. "You're risking your life for me. Don't flatter yourself. I'm doing it because someone's got to end him, and because you deserve more than running." She looked into the flames. "I don't even know what more is anymore." Jonas leaned back on his hands, eyes half closed. "It's waking up one morning and realizing the worst is behind you." The fire cracked softly. Clara reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. They sat that way as dusk fell, the sky fading to steel gray. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The sound carried a strange kind of peace. When the first stars blinked through, Jonas spoke again, low and certain. "We'll ride for the next town at dawn. There's a lawman there who still owes me a favor. If we can get there before Evan's men, maybe we can turn this whole thing around." Clara's eyes lifted to his. "And if we can't," he looked into the fire, "then I'll make damn sure he never touches you again." She studied him a long moment. "Jonas," she said softly, "you don't have to save me." He gave a small smile. "Yeah, I do, because the world didn't." The wind rose again, carrying the smell of rain and smoke. Clara's eyes glistened in the firelight. "Then I'll fight beside you," she said. He turned toward her, the faintest spark of pride in his tired face. "That's what I was hoping to hear." As the night deepened, the two sat in silence, the firelight painting gold over damp grass and tired faces. For the first time, neither looked back toward Dry Creek. Ahead waited danger, but also something neither had dared name. Hope. Jonas adjusted his coat, glancing toward the dark horizon. "Tomorrow we head east. He won't expect that." Clara nodded, her gaze firm. "Let's make it count." The fire burned low, casting long shadows. The land lay quiet under the pale stars, and somewhere far off, thunder rolled again. Jonas listened to it and thought it sounded a lot like a promise. The next day dawned pale and cold. Mist clung to the trees, turning the world to gray. They broke camp early, following the river downstream. Jonas wanted distance between them and the mine. Clara rode stiffly, her hands trembling on the reins, but her jaw was set. Around noon, the river widened, churning fast from rain. Jonas eyed it with a frown. "We'll have to cross." Clara looked uncertainly at the current. "It's deep." "Not too deep for the horse. Hold on to me and don't let go." He led the gelding into the water. The current seized him instantly, dragging hard. Clara clung to his waist. The horse snorted, hooves sliding over slick stones. Halfway through, a log swept past, striking Jonas in the shoulder. He grunted, losing his grip on the reins. The horse stumbled. "Jonas!" Clara screamed as the water surged higher. She slid sideways, almost pulled away. Jonas lunged, catching her arm. The cold tore through him like knives. He heaved her up, pushing her toward the saddle, but the river dragged them both under. For a breathless moment, there was only dark water and silence. Then Jonas's boots found ground. He shoved Clara upward, coughing and gasping, and together they stumbled on the far bank, collapsing on the wet grass. She turned toward him, eyes wide, voice shaking. "You should have let me go." He rolled onto his back, breathing hard. "Not while I've got breath left." She stared at him, the river's roar fading to a dull hum. Then she reached out, her hand trembling, and touched his cheek. "You don't know what he'll do when he finds us." "I've got a fair idea," Jonas said, sitting up, "but I'm done letting him win." He stood and helped her to her feet. Her dress clung to her, heavy and torn. She looked small against the endless land, but there was a new light in her eyes, something fierce. They walked until the river disappeared behind them, stopping when the land opened into a quiet field. Jonas built another fire, and they sat close to it, drying their clothes. The silence between them wasn't awkward this time. It was heavy with understanding. Clara spoke first. "Back then, you used to say a man can't outrun his own ghosts. I was drunk when I said that. Doesn't make it untrue." He smirked, tossing a stick into the fire. "Guess I'm about to find out." Her voice softened. "You're risking your life for me. Don't flatter yourself. I'm doing it because someone's got to end him, and because you deserve more than running." She looked into the flames. "I don't even know what more is anymore." Jonas leaned back on his hands, eyes half closed. "It's waking up one morning and realizing the worst is behind you." The fire cracked softly. Clara reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. They sat that way as dusk fell, the sky fading to steel gray. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The sound carried a strange kind of peace. When the first stars blinked through, Jonas spoke again, low and certain. "We'll ride for the next town at dawn. There's a lawman there who still owes me a favor. If we can get there before Evan's men, maybe we can turn this whole thing around." Clara's eyes lifted to his. "And if we can't?" He looked into the fire. "Then I'll make damn sure he never touches you again." She studied him a long moment. "Jonas," she said softly, "you don't have to save me." He gave a small smile. "Yeah, I do, because the world didn't." The wind rose again, carrying the smell of rain and smoke. Clara's eyes glistened in the firelight. "Then I'll fight beside you," she said. He turned toward her, the faintest spark of pride in his tired face. "That's what I was hoping to hear." As the night deepened, the two sat in silence, the firelight painting gold over damp grass and tired faces. For the first time, neither looked back toward Dry Creek. Ahead waited danger, but also something neither had dared name. Hope. Jonas adjusted his coat, glancing toward the dark horizon. "Tomorrow we head east." "He won't expect that." Clara nodded, her gaze firm. "Let's make it count." The fire burned low, casting long shadows. The land lay quiet under the pale stars, and somewhere far off, thunder rolled again. Jonas listened to it and thought it sounded a lot like a promise. The dawn came cold and gray over the hills. A thin mist rolled through the cottonwoods, blurring the line between earth and sky. Ethan rode with his collar turned up. Clara pressed close behind him on the saddle. The mare's breath fogged the air, hooves clopping steady on the frost-hardened trail. Every sound carried. The creak of leather, the jangle of spurs, the faint murmur of the river that led north toward the McGraw ranch. Clara hadn't spoken much since the ambush. Her hands were wrapped tight around Ethan's coat, her eyes fixed on the horizon. There was a silence between them that wasn't awkward. It was survival. Words felt like a luxury now. "You sure you want to face him?" Ethan finally asked, his voice low, rough from the cold. "You could keep riding. I can handle McGraw alone." She shook her head, hair tangled and wind-blown. "He took everything I had. My home, my father's land, my name. I'll see it ended with my own eyes." Ethan gave a small nod. There was no arguing with that tone. It wasn't vengeance she spoke of. It was closure. By mid-morning, they reached the foothills overlooking the McGraw property. The ranch was a scar on the landscape, once lush pasture, now stripped and fenced with barbed wire. Smoke curled from the main house chimney. Horses stood restless in corral. And there, by the barn, men moved with rifles in hand. McGraw had been expecting a reckoning. Ethan dismounted, scanning the valley through his spyglass. 5 men. 6, if that one by the trough's worth counting. Clara slid down beside him, clutching the worn rifle Ethan had given her. Her bare feet were bound in rough cloth now, still torn from her exile weeks ago. He always kept cowards close, she muttered. Ethan looked at her, admiring her quiet steel. You're no longer the woman they left for dead. No, she said softly. And you're not the man who walked away from everything. They exchanged a glance that said more than words could. Then Ethan loaded his rifle, checked his revolver, and started down the hill. The air was sharp and still. Every step crunched the frost. The closer they got, the heavier the silence grew, until only the rhythmic click of metal filled it. Then came the bark of a voice from the barn. "Ryder, that's you?" McGraw's tone was mock-friendly, but his men shifted nervously. They knew what was coming. Ethan stopped 20 paces from the corral, rifle slung across his shoulder. "You've been running this valley with a whip and a gun long enough, McGraw. Time it ended." The man stepped out, broad-shouldered, gray-bearded, eyes mean as winter. "You think one washed-up ranger and a broken woman can take my land?" Clara stepped forward, rifle raised. "This was never your land. You stole it. You took it from families you burned out, including mine." McGraw smirked. "Girl, you're lucky I didn't finish what I started." Ethan's hand twitched toward his revolver. "Then finish it now." The first shot cracked through the valley. Ethan dove for cover behind the trough as McGraw's men opened fire. Clara dropped to her knees, returning a wild shot that clipped a hat clean off one outlaw's head. Horses screamed and scattered. Dust lifted like smoke. The air filled with the thunder of gunfire. Ethan moved fast, firing from the shadows, his bullets clean and deliberate. He hit one man square in the chest. Another spun and went down hard. Clara's aim grew steadier with each pull of the trigger. She was scared, yes, but she was angry too. It steadied her hand. Then the barn doors burst open, and McGraw himself came out with a shotgun. "You think you can steal back what's mine?" he roared. Ethan rose, reloading as he moved. "Was never yours." McGraw fired, one barrel. The shot tore through Ethan's arm, spinning him back. Clara screamed, rushing forward, her rifle shaking in her hands. McGraw turned toward her, grinning like the devil himself. "You again. I should have left you for the coyotes." But Clara fired first. The blast echoed like thunder off the canyon walls. McGraw staggered, eyes wide, then crumpled to his knees in the dirt. His shotgun slipped from his grasp. For a moment, everything went silent except the wind whispering through the pines. Ethan clutched his bleeding arm, grimacing. "You all right?" Clara lowered the rifle slowly, tears cutting to the soot on her face. "I am now." Behind them, the last of McGraw's men dropped their weapons and fled into the hills. The ranch lay quiet again, smoke drifting from the chimney like a dying ghost. Clara stood there, breathing hard, the weight of years finally lifted. Ethan turned toward the barn, scanning for any sign of life. Nothing, just the slow creak of a door swinging loose in the breeze. "It's over," he said softly. Clara nodded, but her eyes were distant. "Over," she echoed. Yet her hands still trembled. They buried McGraw at sundown, behind the barn he'd built on stolen soil. The sky was the color of cold steel, the wind quiet and heavy with the smell of rain. Clara said no words over the grave. She didn't need to. The silence spoke enough. Ethan bound his wound tight, with a strip torn from his shirt. He looked pale but steady, his jaw set against the pain. "We'll need to ride soon," he said. "There'll be lawmen coming. And men like McGraw, they always leave behind someone worse." Clara looked toward the hills. "Where will we go?" He shrugged. "Someplace quieter. North, maybe. There's land still honest there." For a long while, they didn't move. The world felt strange, too still, too hollow after so much fight. Clara ran her fingers through the dirt, tracing lines like the ones her father once drew when marking their land boundaries. For the first time, she wasn't sure what those lines meant anymore. "You ever think," she asked quietly, "that maybe some things can't be reclaimed?" Ethan looked at her, then out at the ranch. "Maybe, but you can build something new in their place. Rain began to fall, soft, steady. Clara lifted her face to it, eyes closing. The dust turned to mud around McGraw's grave, washing the blood from the earth. By morning, they'd pack what they could: food, a blanket, a rifle each. Clara found an old photograph inside the house, cracked and faded. Her father standing by the porch, smiling, a young girl in his arms. She tucked it into her pocket, without a word. As they rode out, the ranch shrank behind them, swallowed by the mist. Ethan's wound slowed him, but he never complained. Clara rode beside him, her posture straight, her eyes calm. The road ahead wound through rolling hills and river valleys, a country half forgotten by men like McGraw. Halfway through the valley, Ethan pulled up his horse. "Hold on," he said. He slid off, limping toward a ridge overlooking the plain. Clara followed, curious. Below them stretched miles of untouched grassland, quiet, untouched, waiting. Ethan smiled faintly. "That's what freedom looks like," he said. "Not a badge, not a deed, just this." Clara looked at him, then at the horizon. "You ever think we might find peace there?" He took a breath. "If we earn it." The rain eased. A faint light broke through the clouds. Not golden, not dramatic, just clean, natural daylight spilling over the grass. It was enough. They rode on through the quiet. For the first time, there was no fear in their silence, only understanding. Clara reached for his hand briefly, then let go, both of them knowing the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But it was theirs now. As the trail vanished behind them, the voice of the narrator broke through, steady and reflective. So maybe that's what the frontier was. Not a place to conquer, but to survive. A test of what a heart could carry, what a soul could forgive. And when they tell this story years from now, maybe they'll remember it not for the blood or the fire, but for what came after, the moment two lost souls found their way home again. He paused, the sound of wind and hooves fading into the distance. "If this story moved you," the voice said softly, "don't forget to subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Out here, every story is worth remembering."